So Eminem is back with his 12th studio album, The Death of Slim Shady, Coup de Grace, and he's really been promoting this and hyping it up the past couple months with the lead singles Houdini and then Toby, and obviously just being active on social media and really just posting about this album pretty frequently. And as Eminem himself said, this album is a concept album with a narrative that is really focused on reflecting on the Slim Shady alter ego and of course killing it off. Now, with most music that modern Eminem puts out, it really seems like there is a certain group of younger people that do not fuck with his music and thinks it's cringe and corny, and obviously the millennials that still appreciate him as that lyrical miracle that he once was in the good old rap from the good old days, you know what I mean? So let's see how Twitter reacted to this album. Alright, so our first tweet comes from Sean, who says Eminem really just dropped the hardest Diddy diss bar we've possibly ever heard. Layers on layers. I want to see these other rappers to match this Diddy diss. And then he shows the actual bar here, which is off of Fuel. Alright, next we got Music Muse, who says Eminem walking out the studio after making Album of the Year, and then shows a picture of a man on fire. Next up, we got JID himself saying, my hip hop heart is happy. So of course I love Jid, and it was amazing to see him on this album. When I heard that look, I started going crazy. Great first time listen. And it was just a nice inclusion for Eminem to have one of the best modern lyrical rappers on a track, and obviously Eminem himself, who is one of the best lyrical rappers of all time, and definitely the best feature on the album for me. I didn't think the features were all around too strong, not that they were all bad, but I really like this feature. Cole World says, we never getting Cole and Eminem collab. So of course, going into this album, I heard rumors that Cole was going to be on it, and I was so excited, bro. And when I heard Jid, I was like, oh, he's definitely going to be on it. Like, he's got to be later in the track list. He fucking wasn't. Looking back on it though, I do appreciate that M kept the features limited, because I feel like for a more personal album like this, it needed to be more Eminem focused, you know? The Eminem Bible tweets out, Album of the Year, check. Album of the Decade, check. This is the biggest fucking glaze I ever heard, bro. This is just not true at all. And don't take that as me hating on the album. I actually did like it, but come on now. Album of the Year, no. Album of the Decade, definitely not. Mr. Walkster tweets out, no wonder this Eminem album is pure garbage. He always says corny shit like this, like, buddy, nobody cares about you anymore or trying to cancel you. And then shows this bar from Trouble. So a big complaint of modern Eminem is that his music is cringe and corny, and a lot of those complaints come from people in Gen Z, which is a valid complaint. I would agree with that. I mean, the Aura Nano bar, I mean, yeah, he's a little corny sometimes. But specifically in this album, I think people saw him kind of really trying to be edgy, and they kind of saw that as embarrassing and corny, and you know, I don't think people were actually offended by what he was saying. They just think it's weird to hear a 50-year-old man talk about, you know, Caitlyn Jenner and gay people and fucking midgets and shit, which, you know, understandable. At the same time though, I feel like it was played up in kind of a corny way, specifically on this album, to show how the Slim Shady alter ego does not work in the modern day. You know, that it is weird, it is corny, you know, and that's why he has to fucking die in the end. That's why Eminem kills him, right? And maybe I'm giving M too much credit here, and he really is just fucking corny, but I feel like in the context of the album, it actually works. Obviously there is some corny bars and lines that I can't excuse, but I feel like the controversial corny stuff, it works in the album. Alright, Wast tweets out, Eminem dissed Kendrick Lamar in his new album. Were y'all even listening, bruh? And then shows the bars where Eminem is quote unquote dissing Kendrick, Ye, Wayne, Joyner Lucas, and some other people that aren't included in these pictures. But basically the misconception with this is right before this he talks about going into the mind of like a hater, and this is supposed to be like young, I guess, rap critics finding small details that are wrong with like the GOATs albums. I guess Joyner Lucas is one of the GOATs, but you know. Nine said Eminem fans tonight, and then showed a picture of Squidward listening to Temporary. Field tweets out, proud to be an Eminem hater, not because he's quote unquote offensive and my feelings are hurt, but because he's so unbelievably corny and washed up to still be doing this stick at age checks notes 51. It's time for jazz, dude. Back it up. Alright, next, Tom Smalls tweets out, me hearing Temporary and Somebody Save Me after laughing and vibing for 45 minutes. Trey tweets out, 51 years old and he just dropped the best album within the last decade. Your favorite rapper can't fucking compete. Eminem is the greatest of all time. What is up with Eminem fans and this being the best album of the decade? Let's all calm down. I like the album too, but come on now. OI tweets out a YouTube comment that says, the thing is, he's not actually saying anything offensive on the album. He says explicitly that being trans is okay, being gay is okay, do whatever you want with your life, and that's okay. He's pissed at the PC censorship that wants to cancel everything. I think it's important to make that distinction. And also, that's shady. Marshall is actually troubled by it and has doubts and doesn't want to be the bully. And he actually apologizes and he kills Shady. This album has layers. So I feel like a lot of people are gonna be like, oh, you can't just say Shady said all that stuff and that just makes everything okay. But I mean, the point of the album is that Slim Shady is saying all this bad stuff and then Eminem is the one that's like trying to stop him, right? You have to view it through the lens that it's like a story, a movie, you know, it's a concept album. And I mean, I think M carried it out in a pretty tasteful way. I mean, it's about as tasteful as an Eminem album can be carried out, you know what I mean? With the whole, you know, how he was kind of wrestling with the Slim Shady persona. It's like his little devil on his shoulder, and I think it like kind of took over his, you know, body, whatever, making him say all this shit. You know, I really liked the narrative. I thought it was cute. I thought it was a fun listen. And unlike a lot of other albums this year, you know, it kept me interested to keep listening to the album and listen to it again on re-listen and, you know, kind of try to discover more stuff about the whole concept and narrative. Trey tweets out, guilty conscience too, oh my god, and then shows this picture of SpongeBob. So I'm just gonna take this opportunity to yap about what is probably my favorite song in the album, at least from like a conceptual standpoint. I love this song, and I think it marks an important shift in the album, as obviously this is the death of Slim Shady. And hearing M talk about his old Slim Shady persona as something he used to hide behind and would use as an excuse to kind of say all this messed up stuff that he was really thinking in his mind was super interesting and just a great angle to take on the whole alter ego. And like I said earlier, this does mark an important shift in the album, and I'll talk about the structure of the album later, but I do feel like the conceptual part of the album kind of falls apart after this song. Comrade CFC says, no stupid looking curtain call to like album cover. We are so back. And yes, I am so glad that this album cover has a classic kind of timeless look to it and is not like curtain call to and is not like the Houdini cover, because those are both just filled with unnecessary details and honestly they just look corny. I guess M just knows to clutch up when it's time for the real thing. Okay, Hip Hop Sessions tweets out, also, one last thing is Eminem's beat selections on here were fire. None of the beats were bad, all beats delivered, and he did justice to them. I don't really have too much to say on the beats. They're definitely not like crazy. They're definitely not his best beats he's had on an album, but I think, you know, they allowed him to just kind of shine lyrically and, you know, do his thing. They're all right. I like Toby's beat. I like the guitar. And I like the Houdini and the brand new dance beat. I'm a sucker for that kind of throwback shit, like the old Eminem beats, but, you know, I thought the rest of them were alright. Sophie says, y'all can analyze Eminem in any way you want. You can hate him, and he is corny. Not every joke lands, but this time in The Death of Slim Shady, it couldn't be more obvious that he's leaning into it because it ends with Shady having to die, because he doesn't fit anymore in today's context or in his head. So I did kind of talk about this earlier, how he's very heavily leaning into the controversial stuff, which does kind of come across a little corny, but again, I thought it worked with the context of the album. But as for the corny bars, there is definitely a couple on here. I mean, the sock puppet line and the alphabet soup line are among some pretty cringe bars in the album. You know, he's not without them. But I feel like overall, there was way less than usual. And, you know, I can appreciate a corny Eminem bar here and there, alright? He gets a laugh out of me every now and again. Man says, this new Eminem album is some of the worst shit I've ever heard. JDR says, after first listen to the album, I can say as a person who has been through recovery and still working every day to be better than the last, it is his story and evidence of the same. Personal inventory and message of thankfulness for what the worst has taught. Hit says, worst album ever made, unrelease it now. And then shows a picture of Michael Che from SNL. Kirko tweets out, Eminem's Kanye name drop on Antichrist. Say they wish that I wasn't so angry, don't want to see me go off the deep end like yay. With modern Kanye, I low-key could see him responding to some shit like this, even though it's not that big of a deal. I could see him having a meltdown over this, so we'll have to see. Eminem Media tweets out, news anchors Kimberly Gill and Devin Scillian talk about working with Eminem on his new album, The Death of Slim Shady, where they appear on the breaking news skit. So in the video, it basically explains how these local kind of news reporters in Detroit, I guess, were chosen by Eminem to be on his skit, and it's just a fun detail, really cool that Eminem's including, his city in his album. Kato tweets out, The Death of Slim Shady. Honestly, cool concept, and he does manage here and there to pull it off quite well. It's also staggering how he manages to replicate his older voices and sounds, Renaissance and Brand New Dance. It also has more structure than his previous albums. So, getting into the structure of the album, I really do like the narrative and concept like I've said before. Although it is a little weird, at least from how I interpret it, how I guess he's taking over Eminem's mind, but in the end of Guilty Conscience 2, I guess it's all a dream, which feels a little cheap. Like, at that point, why would you just not make it a real thing? Like, why does it have to be kind of cheapened by how the whole it wasn't even real all along? It's like, is Slim Shady even dead because it was a dream? I don't know. But that out of the way, I really did actually like the whole narrative and story of him killing off his alter ego. Tyrone tweets out, The Death of Slim Shady, Eminem, 8 out of 10. Most catchy flows on any Eminem album since The Eminem Show, cool concept, consistently good, great features and production. Worst moments are when territory feels too rehashed, but that's relatively rare. Easemill/Jid were stunning, and Guilty Conscience 2 was mental. I do love the flows in this album, and I do love his kind of return to form from the old Slim Shady flows, which I know some people are going to say, oh, it's unoriginal. I don't care. I still like it. It still sounds good. And I really like the Eminem choruses on here, like the Evil chorus and the Antichrist chorus. I honestly like Eminem's choruses on here more than the feature choruses. I feel like it's been a long time since I've heard like a good Eminem chorus. You know what I mean? And as far as the whole territories too rehashed, I think the album is a little repetitive in that way. Obviously the Caitlyn Jenner bars and like the repeated comments about like minority groups, like we get it, you know what I mean? But I don't know. I think it was entertaining, and I think it worked for the 12 tracks or so before Slim Shady dies, SP Doom tweets out, here's how you fix the death of Slim Shady. Scrap everything. Begin the album with a track where M kills the Slim Shady persona. Use the album to explore what it means for M to have to abandon his old persona and where his life is at now. You'll get an actual introspection. I disagree with this, honestly. I think the way that he carried it out was honestly more fun and made for like a more exciting kind of narrative with the album, and I don't know, it was more entertaining this way. You don't get a lot of like story kind of albums, it's no Good Kid Mad City, but I feel like this doesn't really happen a lot nowadays. Playboy Party tweets out, quick album review, The Death of Slim Shady, Eminem. Great album, was hoping for some more features, especially from people like Dre or 50. Some songs don't need to be on here, such as Toby or Head Honcho. Overall score, 8 out of 10. First of all, I was really expecting a 50 and Dre feature, especially with like the return to form to Slim Shady. But like I said, I appreciate the limited features, although I think those two people specifically would have been good inclusions. And yes, while I appreciate the concept, like I mentioned earlier, I really do think the concept part of the album falls apart after Guilty Conscience 2. You start to get tracks like Toby, which I actually do like Toby, and tracks like Head Honcho, which I actually don't like, but they really just don't fit with the album and don't add anything to the narrative. I think songs like Temporary and Somebody Save Me were perfect inclusions because it kind of showed, alright, Slim Shady is dead, let's get the more personal Eminem, reflecting on more mature kind of grown-up topics that Slim Shady would not have touched on. I thought those two tracks were perfect inclusions, and I think the other tracks on the back half of the album should have been more like that, because Toby, Head Honcho, and some of those other songs just really don't fit. But I will take this opportunity to say that Big Sean fucking spazzed on that. Alright, and so did Baby Tron. He had a good verse too. Okay, last tweet is from D. He says, welcome back, Ken Kniff. And the biggest smile came on my face when I heard Guess Who's Back, bro. I love my boy. He's definitely the funniest fucking Eminem character from his past albums, and I was so glad to see him return for this. That is all the tweets that I have reacting to this album. So, in conclusion, I think really there was no in between. People either hated this or loved it, so kind of what I was expecting. But personally, I like this album. I think right now that it just came out, I'm a little more excited and kind of like it more than I probably will after I have some time to sit with it. But I was happy Eminem was kind of in his old bag. Even if it is a little unoriginal, it was nice to hear. And I do appreciate the narrative that he went for and accomplished with this album. All right, I love y'all. I'm going to see you next time.